I wonder if that's why the sound's been weird. All right, let's put away the books. Put them away. You guys can look at them later. Yeah. Put them away, please. Well, the idea is in case one, you guys ever need to contact each other, like say, hey, you got a project to work on together. You got some numbers you can call. Of course, you could argue that one just give your phone number at that point, but that's the original idea. Do what? Well, yeah, because it's contact information. We don't want to give your personal cell phone information. Besides, we only have what your parents gave us. So whatever. All right. So, I believe we left off here talking about the Mediterranean. We get past that. So we had talked about that. We talked about that and that. All right. So we were talking about that. Okay, cool. Yeah. So the Mediterranean. So basically, this was the Greek world. If you look at maps from ancient Greece and Rome, this is pretty much what they acknowledged as existence. Now, that's what it was. So anyhow, it's just messed up. So everyone has one? That's the number. Anyway, so the name Mediterranean in Latin is actually the sea in the middle of the earth. Terra being earth, Medi referring to in the center, Medi, Terra, so Mediterranean, sea in the middle of the earth. Right. So, again, this is kind of a whole major climate zone that's distinctive. So, if you look at how that impacts people's lives, you'll see there's sort of a common cultural element within all Mediterranean culture. Even in Africa, there's a lot of similarities. Now, truthfully, if you look at North Africa, it has most in common with the Middle East. Because in the 600s AD, the Muslims expanding their empire across the northern part of Africa and converted, sometimes to the point of the sword, a lot of these different peoples, and they became distinctly like Arabs, Bedouins, and that sort of thing. So that particular area is a little different, but also has a lot of similarities as well. For instance, different types of foods that are fairly common based upon Moroccan food is a lot in common with Israeli food, it's a lot in common with Greek food. They're just different characteristics. It's similar but different, if that makes any sense. And in particular, you can look at a lot of types of crops that are grown, not so much in Sub-Saharan Africa, but especially like in the southern parts of Europe, and it's all very, very similar. Food items are very, very similar. But I recognize. Spain's pretty interesting for that purpose as well, because at one point, the southern half of Spain was controlled by Arabs, specifically actually Moroccans, the Moors. And so that type of food cuisine is sort of like half European, half Middle Eastern. So it's pretty unique in that regard. Anyhow, we talk about weather again in the south. It's actually a combination of things that influence it. Basically, if you can imagine the Alps as being like a giant blender, and instead of blending like water or ingredients for a delicious smoothie, it's like winds and water patterns distributing it all across Europe, pushing out cold winds called mistrals, and then mixing up hot winds from the south and the area of Africa called sirocco's. So this whole mess of winds and water and things like that greatly influence the patterns in Europe. So again, if you look at what causes weather, there's really four main things. Big one is wind and water, and then elevation. Make sense? Now, why that's going to matter? Climate really, really depends, or rather affects how people live their lives. You know, what type of activities folks participate in. For a long, long, long time, you're predominantly agricultural. Then, after the Industrial Revolution, they started shifting away from it, but still, there is a decent amount of agriculture in the rural areas of Europe. It's just maybe not as much as there used to be. If you look at the Spain and Byzantine, the Spain, Byzantine, pardon. This is actually a weather map that shows the movement of Scirocco's into southern Europe. But what's cool is these winds can actually carry things. So they found soil that originated from Africa in Europe. So that's just kind of a neat way, kind of showing this movement of not only weather, but also like physical things. But this is the type of weather that's blowing from there. Yeah, it's pretty hot. The desert's a pretty cool place. First of all, anyone know what desert that is? It's the Sahara, sure. Sahara is how we pronounce it, sure, but the Arabic Sahara. We'll tell you about that. You guys know what Sahara means in Arabic? It means desert, right? So it's the desert. Thank you for reiterating that. Yeah.
So they would call it Sahara.
No, they just call it Sahara. A-L apostrophe big S A big A A-R-A. There's actually two different H sounds. There's two different S sounds in Arabic. There's actually sounds that don't exist in English and Arabic too. That's why if you ever transliterate Arabic, there's like colons that are used to try to make sounds. It's pretty wild. I remember trying to type out something to a guy from the United Arab Emirates, and he was just like, "That's awful." And I was like, "I know, I'm sorry." What a deal, dude. But actually, the funny thing about it is that, of course, the Sahara Desert is very different than deserts all around the world. For instance, most deserts aren't big sandy places like this. Most are pretty rocky in comparison. Think sort of like Death Valley. If you guys have ever seen that before. It's pretty rough either way, but it's just a different kind of rough, if that makes any sense. Now, the other thing about deserts like this, and actually all deserts, is the temperature is very, varies quite a bit. For instance, of course, during the day it's incredibly hot, but what about at night? See, it doesn't get freezing, but it does get cold. It's like 60 degrees, which doesn't seem that bad considering you can go from like 120 degrees to 60. That's a 60-degree jump in one day. That is unbelievably weird. So, like, surviving in the desert is difficult, not because, like, of one extreme climate, but because it's so variable. There's many people who freeze to death in the desert, which just seems peculiar, but it does happen. So that's the hot we're talking about, and this is the cold we're talking about. Now, these winds influence the weather all throughout Europe, sort of like how we've been influenced by weather patterns. Even like last winter, how we had that polar vortex come across from the northern bits of Canada and just kind of hung out here. That can greatly influence the way that we experience weather and indeed how we live our lives. So weather's kind of a big deal. But as far as what the climate is like in the Mediterranean, generally speaking, it's hot and dry in the summer, and then it's cold and mild, or cool, I should say, not cold, and with mild winters. Now, it can get cold, but generally it's not as cold as we think about like here per se. Now, the types of plants, we talked about chaparral, things like olives and things like grapes. These are the types of things that traditionally grow here and, are a big part of traditional life. Olives have for a long time been like a staple crop amongst Greeks and Romans. I mean, think about how often olives are in Italian cuisine in one form or another. Not necessarily even whole olives, like olive oil. You know what I mean? Like it's in everything. It's like we're gonna make bread with olive oil, then we're gonna dip it in olive oil. Hey. And the thing is, olive oil is used for a whole bunch of different things, not just food. It was used as a form of oil to burn it in terms of lamps. It was used to make soap. In fact, in some cases, it was just used as soap. Cover yourself, slide yourself in oil. And then you get these things that looked a bit like squeegees. Like you wash your car with it, and just scrape all the gross off of you. It'd be all like oily and disgusting, and you like put it in a bowl. And this is how you would bathe in some cases. In fact, legend has it that the Roman aristocracy ladies would buy the scrapings from really famous gladiators and keep it for a variety of purposes.
Okay, that's just
It's big
makes
gross.
that awkward.
Yeah, that's because it is pretty awkward. But anyhow, that's the rumor, anyways. But the other thing is like it was used in the Olympics, the first Olympic Games, where everybody competed both in buff, they were nude, and slathered in oil because, for instance, there's a game they had that was kind of similar to football, and someone tried to tackle you, you just keep running, let's slip off of you because you're covered in oil, sort of thing. So, but then again, of course, if you got face plant whenever you're covered in oil, you can slide. But also, like, you have all this, like, I couldn't imagine, like, you imagine, like, this cut grass field, you go sliding across, you stand, you're just, like, covered in grass clippings and dirt. Yeah. So there's, like, actually a decently famous statue called the Scraper, where it's got this athlete who's just, like, done back, he's taking the scraper, just scraping off this, like, dirt clods off of his body. It does work. And it's good for your skin. It's pretty awesome. Anyhow, it's also pretty expensive, to be honest, because making it takes a lot of processing, and because of that, it's going to be reserved for the very wealthy. That being said, everybody tends to have access to this olive disease. Right, so moving on. So in terms of northern Europe, the area contains mostly Cubic continental, the most common there. A distinguishing factor, though, is tundra, which is, of course, the same thing we saw in Canada, but it also has this permafrost stuff that we talked about before, as well as deciduous and coniferous forests. In fact, most of Europe at one point was covered in forests. Did we talk about fairy tales before? I don't remember that. Okay, so here's the thing is, if you can imagine medieval society, or even before that, Dark Ages, where you've got all these forests covering Europe, forests are kind of scary places, aren't they? I mean, keep in mind, this is not the world today where we have expanded to the point where we have wiped animals off the face of the earth because they can't compete with human beings. This is where animals still kind of rule the world, and going out in the woods is dangerous. That's where wolves are, and all kinds of other wild animals. It's dark, it's mysterious. You physically cannot see well in the woods. How many of you guys have ever been to like a true forest, where like you're going through it and like the sun barely reaches through all of the trees? It's pretty dark, isn't it? Which forest did you go to?
Oh no, I just know like when I was like younger, because me and my dad like to take us hiking a lot, and we were doing forest.
Cool. Well, Burn Mine is the closest one I'm aware of, and that can get pretty real, But even that, like our forests there are pretty well pacified. This was not that case, and so early minds tend to have this kind of apprehension about the woods for good reason. And they also prescribed a lot of supernatural causes for everything. So, they would say that the forests were evil. Evil things live in the forest. You don't go into the forest unless you're prepared. And even then, you got to be careful. So to put that in other words, if you guys have ever seen like fairy tales, true fairy tales, how many fairy tales have dark or dangerous forests in them? Like a lot of them, That's one, sure. And the thing is, there's of course like the ones we're probably familiar with, like from Little Red Riding Hood, and maybe ones we're not as familiar with, such as Fear Not. But a significant number of them do have woods and forests in them, and so much so there's actually a play that is sort of a combination of all these different fairy tales that's just literally called Into the Woods. And it takes its name from that tradition kind of thing. If we have time, I'll actually show you a series, one episode, called The Storyteller, starring John Hurt. It was from the 1980s. And basically, you guys know who Jim Henson is? The guy who's creating the Muppets, like Kermit the Frog, things like that. Well, he did a lot of stuff before there was a lot of advanced special effects. And he did this series that sort of tried to recreate these old fairy tales. And I can tell you what, in the 1980s, they did not care about giving kids nightmares. Like, seriously, there's some really freaky stuff in this series. There's one episode where, there's a giant, and this guy, pulls his heart out and crushes it. It's just kind of like, what is going on? Not to mention, fairy tales, when you get right down to them, are pretty dark. A lot of them kind of whitewashed nowadays, kind of made cleaner and nicer and happier ending-ish, probably the best example is Little Mermaid. You know how that actually ends.
Yeah.
No one is happy by the end of that. Basically. Well, because, the mermaid doesn't end up with the prince, instead she dies.
That's the real one.
Yeah. The real version, she actually turns into sea foam, yeah. Some of you guys know that. I've seen that going around on Facebook, so I'm sure you're aware of it. But, this is, of course, an unsatisfying ending, so no. But, probably the best example, too, most recently, is the fact that the movie Frozen is based off the story of the Ice Queen, and she, kills people. It's not nice and everything's happy. It's people die. It's I don't care, sort of thing. It's not I feel really bad about it. That's why I really dislike the movie Maleficent, because,
I love that.
it was horrible.
What? That movie is great.
Because here's why. Maleficent is a villain. She's supposed to be evil. Not, I'm just misunderstood. I was betrayed and all. No! She's evil! She's the queen of all evil. That's what she is. In the Disney movie, even. And that was hardcore. If we're talking about really, truly evil Disney villains, that's one of the top 3. We talked about this, I think.
No.
We never talked about the Disney villains?
No.
Oh my goodness. So one of the things I always like to talk about is who's the most evil of the Disney villains? Who?
Bill.
Not the most evil.
No,
Not even close.
She's not.
She wants to make a coach. She's just crazy. She's got scary eyes. She's not the most evil. Here's the 3 that I think get the most street cred for that. Because most villains, if you really get to them, they're just greedy, and that's not evil. Like Jafar, not evil. Greedy, not evil. However, well, kind of evil, a little bit evil, but not really evil. Evil, Maleficent, she's he didn't invite me to this party. Don't worry about it. Actually, do worry about it, because I'm going to murder your child. Harsh, more evil. Okay? Number 2 would be my vote, would be Dr. Facilier from The Princess and the Frog, otherwise known as Shadow Man.
Well, he's just scared because he doesn't want the spirits to
He makes an agreement to steal the souls of everyone in New Orleans to give them to his evil gods. I'm pretty certain that qualifies as evil. However, he's just number 2. Number 1 is from a 1980s Disney movie that at one point was banned in the United States because it was so horrifying. Which is called The Black Cauldron. The Horned King wants to, and I quote, kill everyone in the world and enslave their undead corpses forever. That's pretty much the most evil you can get. Although an honorable mention, I think, is Frollo from The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Well, because he kind of sings a song about how this one girl, he's fallen in lust with her, and she's going to be with him, or else he's going to burn her alive. And the song is called Hellfire.
Oh.
It's like, what were you thinking, Disney? Seriously, no, because I love showing this, because it's like, people are like, I do not remember this, and you see when you're a kid, you just kind of go, oh, he's a scary guy, singing about scary things, but you go back and realize, like, oh my God, there's like a there's one point a naked dancing woman made of fire, and they actually had to go back, because they got the ratings reviews, and they're like, that's PG-13. They're like, what? We cannot have a PG-13 Disney movie. What is the deal? And they're like, you have a naked dancing chick made of flame. Oh yeah, we kind of do have that. Let's write that out. You know, it's just like, what is going on? Yeah. Princess and Frog. Yeah.
What did you say? On American Horror Story.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, they sell their souls to him and stuff. Is it based off of someone, like, actually?
Yeah, he's based off of a spirit in the voodoo faith called Baron Samedi. And he doesn't really do that. That's sort of like Mephistopheles kind of stuff thrown into it. But yeah, the top hat and the skull face, that's Baron Samedi all the way. But he's actually supposed to be sort of like death, bridges people from one world to the other. Yeah, it's a psychopomp, I think is what they're called, something like that. Yeah, the Grim Reaper, not like dying, but the actual personification of death. Yeah, Shay?
Animology, not like, except Disney movies, what is your most evil movie?
Well, that's a whole other question, isn't it? Most evil character in a movie, period?
Yes.
That's a tough one. I mean, I guess if you're going on absolutely, you got to go with someone like Sauron, who wants to destroy everything in the universe and end creation. It's kind of hardcore. Who's that? Fair enough. Yeah.
What about the funky man from the Nightmare Before Christmas?
Nah.
He's
I mean, he's again,
He's funny though, he is funny.
yeah, the thing is, he's kind of a caricature, so that's again a little bit of a weird thing, you know. Yeah. Sorry. I don't think so. I think it's Fox. That could be wrong.
Because I was going to say, if it was, I used to like.
Oh yeah, Old Wicked Witch of the West was creepy. It's well done.
And after I see Wicked, it makes me like feel bad for her.
Wicked was good.
What her sister was doing. Was the Witch of the West.
Was that? Well, you actually, if you read Wicked, it goes into that. Was that? Well, Alice in Wonderland is pretty messed up when you read it. The guy was on LSD.
I read it like 4 pages. I should have read it. I did not.
Yes, ma'am.
A lot of these movies, like, you guys have a Satanist that would make them mental.
Who? Disney?
Yeah. Yeah, they were saying that about him.
There's a lot of stuff about him after the fact, but not really. There's a lot of things. If you actually do the research about, like, for instance, he was supposed to be anti-Semitic. There's no real proof for that. Yeah, there's all kinds of rumors about him. None, like, very few are true. Actually, one of the papers I read almost every year, I let the sophomores pick their topics about anything in history they want, and someone usually wants to do Walt Disney, and so I've read quite a bit about him.
But also, like, out of movies, I think that the world is just dangerous by itself.
Do what?
Out of all the movies, I think the world is just dangerous by itself. Because it depends, like, it goes after movies, like they did the Purge thing, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that violence comes from some movies.
Well, let's get into a whole other topic, and we can certainly talk about that. But first, let's just finish up here. So, I don't have to talk much about this because you guys have already written it down before. But this, you'll see how I've got bullets. This is the system of notes that I would recommend going to. Basically, the way it works is the main title is Eastern Europe. So you know everything underneath it refers to Eastern Europe. So what about Eastern Europe? We have three main points. It's mostly human continental, it has a lot of mountains, and it has the Danube River. And then it goes on to explain what mountains. So we have the Carpathians, Ural, and Caucasus, for example. And then what about the Danube River? It's the longest river in Europe. You see how that's set up? I could write paragraphs explaining. For instance, I could be like, Eastern Europe is a very mountainous part of Europe. It has several mountain ranges from the Carpathians, the Ural Mountains, and the Caucasus Mountains. It also contains the longest river in Europe, the Danube. You see how that's writing a lot less than writing everything I just said? So the goal you have to be able to do is, whenever I say all that other stuff, you write this. Does that make sense? Because this will get everything else. Now, you might need to add some types of information, like, for instance, if I'm talking about the specifics of the Ural Mountains, how it divides Russia between the European portion of Russia and the Asian part of Russia, but that's just up to you to do as well. Does that make sense? All right, cool. I will stop the recording then, because that is the last slide. Yeah.
The order over
Today.